as more and more debris turned that corner, fell out of suspension in these high-velocity waters, and caused that plunge pull beneath the dam to get ever deeper. Now, if you can envision a deep pool of water with a jet of water, very high velocity, coming down that slope on only one side and then turning a 90-degree, imagine the rotational moment that that would induce in that water. The water would begin to roll in this way, fairly rapidly. It would circulate, and it would begin to scour the downstream face of that dam. The downstream face would slough off in huge slumps of earth. That would compromise the dam embankment itself. But, so 3 failure modes we're talking about so far. Only one is necessary. The first, the principal spillway, should have been repaired many, many years ago when they saw those drains actuating as they were. But for whatever the reasons were, and you know, it's an acceptable reason to me that someone missed it. Someone made a mistake. Someone did their job, did it honorably, and made a mistake. God knows that I have made mistakes. I've been very lucky that I've never lost a dam I've worked on out of hundreds of dams, but I certainly have made mistakes. And I hope that I'm enough of a man to look at those mistakes and admit to them and address them and to drag them out into the light so that other men can look at them, and perhaps we can become better from recognizing our own frailties. I can tell you there's never a time on a job that I was responsible for that I told a man who was employed by me or worked beside me to hide something, most especially from the people who live downstream. And the reason is that I find that a dishonorable thing to do. Go ahead. And again. And this is discussing what's wrong with the emergency spillway in a bit more detail here. There's much wrong with the emergency spillway, as we discussed, erodible soils. Here you can see the possibilities as they considered them. These orange V's here are what are called a V-notch breach, as if that part of the dam was gone. In actuality, although the models would show a V-notch breach, so when you get this inundation study, the inundation study is what's called a sunny day failure. The dam on a sunny day with no storm would have a problem, it would breach, and it would breach, as you would imagine. I mean, everyone knows this. It would breach in a V. A small piece would break out and it would open up into a V-notch failure. That's the way you model those generally. Sunny day breach, V-notch failure. This is the V-notch failure that they envisioned at the O.G. Weir section. Unfortunately, that's not the way it would have happened. Also, even today, they argue that it would have stopped when it got to the bedrock, which is directly beneath the O.G. Weir. But I think we all know better than that. I think we've documented over and over and over again, absolutely, that that's simply not true. There's no validity in continuing that argument anymore because we can look down into 60-foot deep holes that were the bedrock that they want to insist exists there. Here is a photograph with the outlined area of the failure there, literally feet from the O.G. Weir. No doubt, as this evolved, as your sheriff brilliantly evacuated, and as some of you were probably in cars getting out of town, that's how close that came. But for the failed principal spillway holding together as it did, we would have had some level of a failure of a dam. Here's another picture of the O.G. Weir. As you can see, this O.G. Weir, if you put two of them together, it would look just like a bell. And it is made, the pressure side's on the right there, the water tops over it, goes down the slope, and then kicks out so the velocities are not scouring beneath it. But on the bottom picture there, you can see 3 dark areas, 4 dark areas, I guess. I don't know, but I believe, most probably, that those are areas where water is seeping beneath the structure. I think that it's reasonable to assume that the indigenous rock, the local rock beside the dam, will conduct water. I see this over and over and over again. The voids beneath the principal spillway, which actually caused the failure. That's another thing. The principal spillway, a lot of people are talking about cavitation. Cavitation is real. Cavitation is when you have very high velocity water, usually a result of a very high head. For instance, the discharge from the bottom of the dam, which is magnificently high head. It's 770-foot dam holding 600 feet of water. The discharge at the bottom would be about 3,000 or 300 psi. So this is magnificently high pressures at the bottom of that lake trying to discharge out. Those kinds of pressures porting through a dam obviously would cause great problems, but the dam is massive at that point. So that dam resists those pressures. But the water always wants to move through the dam, and in fact, it always does. And that water moving through the dam is called phreatic evolution, or the movement of phreatic water through the dam. Phreatic water is supposed to move through a dam. It looks very much like the cross-section of that. It's a half of a bell curve, and it manifests, it comes out at the bottom. If you have no drains in a dam, you'll have a wet section across the bottom of the dam, no higher than 30% of the total dynamic head up the backside of the dam in a homogeneous dam where the soils are all the same. That's pretty much the worst case scenario. So if you have a seep or a wet spot up a dam higher than 30%, it's a serious issue. It shows that water is moving through that dam not as a phreatic evolution of water through a dam embankment, but as potentially a porting evolution of water, which is when water moves through the structure unimpeded. That, of course, can fail a dam eventually. In this dam, I believe that the weathered rock, which we've seen some of in those areas of severe erosion, I believe that it moves water. And I believe that it moves water in a few places. This is documented in the reports. It's also documented by a huge area, which is wet, on the left groin of the dam. When you refer to left and right on a dam, you're always looking downstream. So if you were to stand on the dam with the lake at your back, on the left-hand side, about halfway up the slope, there's a big green patch, even when things are dead and dry. Always green, irrigated. More than likely, that area is kept hydrated like that by a port where water's moving from the reservoir into the indigenous soils of the abutting soils, and then is coming back into the embankment and creating that wet spot. The problem with completely hydrated soils on an embankment of a dam is this. There's a thing called liquefaction. And if you've ever played with sand castles in the ocean, you've seen kind of this happen. The sand's there and it's completely wet and it holds. And then a wave hits it. And the wave completely saturates it and agitates it a bit, and it just washes away almost like water. Well, on a dam, imagine a dam with the soils completely hydrated, and you can imagine this because everybody's experienced this. This is very muddy. Imagine if that were to vibrate severely, for instance, an earthquake. This is called liquefaction, and what this would produce is what's called a slough. An area of earth would slide downslope in a slough, and it would create, rather than the even embankment of the dam, it would create an area in the embankment where it sharpened off, and then more of this would occur. Theoretically, this is, not theoretically, it absolutely is a failure mode. It may or may not fail a dam, depending on the event, the level of hydration, the depth of hydration, what's causing it, that kind of thing. In this particular dam, this evolution on the downstream side face has been there as far back as I can find. It's always existed. It shows up in report after report after report. They've been watching it, and they continue to watch it. You could hire every engineer in the world to stand at the bottom of this dam and watch this thing, and it will not slow down the evolution of these failures a bit. Watching things does nothing. It requires action. And in that one, I'll get into that, but in that one, the action would be a grouting program, as it would in many of these repairs, to stop this water from moving through the dam. And this is not rocket science. This is generally known knowledge. And we're getting way behind our slides. This is a great one here.